If you want to look, just ask. Those 6 words. That was all it took. Daniel Mercer was standing at his kitchen window, holding cold coffee, watching his 8-year-old daughter chase fireflies in the backyard, completely harmless, completely ordinary, when the woman across the street stepped off a moving truck ramp in heels, a blazer, and zero patience, looked up from her phone and found him staring directly at her through the glass. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She just said it loud enough, clear enough, like a woman who had stopped pretending not to notice things a long time ago. And Daniel Mercer's entire careful, quiet, perfectly managed life cracked straight down the middle. If you're already hooked, hit subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The coffee had been cold for 20 minutes. Daniel knew this because he'd poured it at 7:14, told himself he'd drink it while checking emails, and then got pulled into a revision request from a client in Denver that ate 45 minutes and left the mug sitting forgotten on the counter. By the time he picked it up and walked to the kitchen window, it was stone cold, and he drank it anyway because that was the kind of man Daniel Mercer had become. Practical, unsentimental. The kind of man who drank cold coffee and called it fine. Through the window, Lily was spinning in the backyard grass with her arms out, trying to catch fireflies with her bare hands, failing gloriously, completely unbothered by failure. She was 8 years old, and she still moved through the world like it was built for her comfort. Daniel watched her and felt the particular ache of a parent who knows this quality is temporary, that the world will teach her otherwise eventually, and who wants to slow the clock even knowing he can't. That was what he was thinking. His daughter, the fireflies, the cooling evening. He was not thinking about the moving truck. It pulled up across the street at 7:51. He noted the time only because he glanced at the microwave clock when the engine rumble broke through the quiet. Big truck. Professional movers, 4 of them moving with the efficient silence of people paid by the job. He registered it, the way you register weather background information, nothing requiring attention. Then she stepped off the ramp. Charcoal blazer, white blouse, dark trousers pressed sharp, heels on asphalt, phone at her ear, not casually, not distracted, but actively like a general directing something from a distance. One hand moved without looking, redirecting a mover who had the sofa angled wrong. A single gesture. The mover adjusted immediately. Daniel stared. He knew he was staring. He registered this fact somewhere in the back of his brain and did nothing about it because there was something about the way she moved that his eyes simply refused to leave. Not beauty, though she was beautiful, but presence. The specific presence of someone who had decided long ago that the world could accommodate them or get out of the way, and the world had mostly gotten out of the way. She was mid-sentence on the phone when she ended the call. Clean stop, no wind down, just done. She tucked the phone into her blazer pocket and turned to survey the street the way you survey a situation before committing to it, methodical and unhurried. Her eyes moved across the houses, the parked cars. The oak tree at the corner Mrs. Huang complained about every fall. And then they stopped. On him, through the kitchen window, straight across the street. Direct level, completely unbothered. Daniel did not move. He should have moved. A reasonable man would have stepped back from the window at the exact moment he realized he had been caught staring at a stranger for how long? 30 seconds. A minute more. He genuinely could not say. She looked at him for one long beat. Then she said it, voice carrying clean across the still evening air. Not shouting, not performing. Just projecting the way women who run rooms learn to project. If you want to look, just ask. The coffee mug jerked in Daniel's hand. Not a flinch, a full involuntary jerk. Coffee hit the counter, hit his sleeve. He felt the cold splash on his wrist and still did not look away from her for a full 3 seconds, which was 3 seconds longer than any man with dignity should have held eye contact after getting caught. He stepped back from the window. His heart was doing something loud and unnecessary. "Dad?" Lily burst through this back door with her hands cupped around something glowing faintly between her fingers, face incandescent. "I caught 2. Can we keep them? Just overnight. I'll let them go in the morning. I promise. I'll..." "Get a jar," Daniel said. His voice came out completely normal. He was proud of this. Cabinet under the island, the one with the lid. Lily was already gone, thundering toward the cabinet. Daniel stood at the counter with cold coffee on his sleeve and looked at the window he'd backed away from and felt something. Not attraction. Not yet. Something more like standing in a field when the sky changes color before a storm. A kind of atmospheric pressure, an awareness that something has shifted in the air and whatever comes next will be different from whatever came before. He told himself this was dramatic. He told himself he'd go over tomorrow, introduce himself like a normal adult neighbor, and it would be a 30-second interaction, and that would be that. He believed this completely. He was completely wrong. He did not go over the next day. He told himself he was busy. The Denver client had 3 more revisions. Lily had a dentist appointment at 2. He had groceries to order and a conference call at 4, and there was genuinely no reasonable window of time in which to cross the street and do what exactly. Hello. I'm the man you caught staring at you through glass. Welcome to the neighborhood. No. The timing was wrong. He'd go tomorrow. He didn't go tomorrow either. What he did instead, entirely without meaning to, was notice things. Her lights on before 6. He saw them when he came downstairs to start the coffee across the street upper floor, the warm yellow rectangle of someone already working. 6 in the morning, on a Wednesday. The dog. She had a dog. A big golden retriever she walked at 7:30 sharp every morning, and the dog moved with the cheerful, oblivious confidence of a creature who believed the world was fundamentally generous. She did not look like a woman who had bought a dog because she wanted to. She looked like a woman who had bought a dog because someone told her she needed one, and she had decided to commit to the decision completely. The deliveries, not packages, envelopes. Thick ones, law firm return addresses 2 and 3 days. She signed for them quickly and disappeared inside without reading them in the doorway the way most people did. The way you signed for things you'd been expecting and had already mentally filed. The phone calls. He heard fragments, sometimes not the words, just the register of her voice. Professional. Controlled. And underneath the control on one particular evening when he was weeding the front garden and the sound traveled clearly in the cooling air, something that was not quite exhausted, but was working very hard not to become exhaustion. He was not watching her. He was simply aware of his immediate environment, of the atmospheric conditions of Maple Creek Drive. He was absolutely watching her, and he knew it, and he continued to tell himself otherwise, because that was easier than examining what it meant. The first real conversation happened because of the dog, which felt in retrospect like the universe operating with a sense of humor. Saturday morning. He was doing the oil change he'd pushed back twice already, lying under his car in the driveway, rag in hand, working by feel in the way you do when you've done something enough times that your hands remember it without instruction. He was thinking about nothing in particular. This was honestly the best state he ever achieved. He heard it before he saw it, the rapid-fire click of large paws on asphalt closing fast, followed by a sharp whistle, followed by nothing, which was how he knew the whistle hadn't worked. He rolled out from under the car. The golden retriever was standing 2 feet from his head, examining him with the focused curiosity of an animal who has decided this is the most interesting thing that has happened all week. Up close, the dog was enormous and deeply gentle-looking, with the kind of eyes that suggested he had never in his life considered the possibility that he wasn't welcome. Victoria Calloway was at the far end of the block, leash in hand. Not running, she never seemed to run, this woman, but walking toward him with a particular purposeful stride that covered ground efficiently without appearing rushed. Scout. Her voice carried. Even direct, the voice of someone accustomed to being listened to. Come. Scout looked at her. He looked at Daniel. He sat down. Daniel looked at the dog. He looked at Victoria. He sat up. He's not bothering me, he said. She reached him in another 15 seconds and clipped the leash back to Scout's collar with a single practiced motion. The dog leaned his full weight against her leg with the complete satisfaction of an animal who had gotten exactly what he wanted. He does this, she said. decides someone's trustworthy, and anchors himself. Smart dog. Expensive dog. A beat. I bought him during a professionally catastrophic quarter, believing he would make things simpler. Did he? He has not simplified a single thing in 2 years. She looked at the car, then at him. Oil change. Overdue oil change. She nodded, apparently finding this acceptable. Then, you work from home. Software consulting. Flexible enough to manage school schedules. Lily, she said. The sound of his daughter's name in her mouth startled him slightly. You know her name? She introduced herself. Twice. Something that wasn't quite a smile touched the corner of her mouth. She told me her father reads to her every night, even when he's tired, makes the best French toast in the neighborhood, and once cried at the end of Charlotte's Web, but claimed it was allergies. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. She is 8 years old and a liability, he said. This time Victoria did smile, small and quick, gone, almost before it arrived, but real. The first real thing he'd seen from her. She sounds like someone who pays attention, Victoria said. She pays too much attention. There's no such thing. She said it without thinking, the way people say things they've thought many times before. Then she glanced down at Scout, who was still leaning contentedly against her leg. Thank you for not running him off. He's better company than my client in Denver. She looked at him again, that direct, assessing look, the one that felt like being read rather than seen. The oil filter, she said. You're holding it upside down. He looked at his hand. She was right. He had been holding it upside down for the better part of 10 minutes. Behind him, he heard her laugh, brief, dry, genuinely amused. And then the sound of her walking away, Scout's nails clicking against the asphalt. Daniel sat in his driveway holding an upside-down oil filter and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Embarrassed, in a way that didn't feel entirely bad. Pierre. Marcus Bright arrived Sunday afternoon the way he always arrived, without warning, with strong opinions, and through the back door. It's unlocked, was all he said when Daniel turned from the stove, to find him already in the kitchen, helping himself to the leftover pasta in the fridge. I know it's unlocked, Marcus. It's my house. You should lock it. Marcus pulled out a chair and sat. You live alone. I live with Lily. She's 8. She can't protect you. He pointed his fork. You look weird. I look normal. You look like a man who's been thinking about something he doesn't want to admit he's thinking about. Marcus was a high school history teacher and had spent 20 years reading people who were trying not to be read. He was extremely good at it and extremely annoying because of it. What happened? Nothing happened. Daniel. Marcus. I will sit here until you tell me. Daniel turned back to the stove, stirred something that didn't need stirring. New neighbor moved in across the street. The silence behind him had a particular quality. New neighbor, Marcus said carefully. And nothing. She moved in. That's it. Is the new neighbor a person you find interesting? I don't know her. That is not what I asked. Daniel set down the spoon. He turned around. Marcus was looking at him with the patient, knowing expression of a man who already knew the answer and was simply waiting for the other person to catch up. I was watching from the window, Daniel said. When she was moving in, she saw me. She said if I wanted to look, I should just ask. Marcus put his fork down. He picked it back up. He put it down again. I'm sorry, he said. She said that to you. Yes. First day. Across the street. Just said it. Yes, Marcus. Marcus leaned back in his chair with the expression of a man receiving a gift he hadn't expected. What does she do? CEO of something. Marketing company. Of course she is. He shook his head slowly. Daniel, I say this as your closest friend, and as someone who has watched you eat cold leftovers alone at this table for 3 years. That woman is either the best or the worst thing that's happened to you, possibly at the same time. She's a neighbor. You've been saying that for 3 years about your own life. It's fine. She's just a neighbor. Everything is fine. He picked up his fork again. Everything is not fine, and that's not a bad thing. That's called being alive. Daniel looked at him for a long moment. Finish your pasta, he said, and stay out of my business. Marcus smiled into his bowl. Absolutely, he said. Sure. The night that changed the geography of everything happened on a Thursday. Lily was asleep. 9:14. Daniel was on the back porch with a book, and the kind of quiet he usually liked, and tonight couldn't settle into for reasons he refused to examine directly. Then he heard it. Sharp. Clear. From across the way, the unmistakable sound of glass hitting tile and shattering. He was on his feet before the sound finished. Not the front of her house. The back, her kitchen, through the yard, the light on a shadow moving fast. He stood at his fence for exactly 4 seconds, and then walked around front. Crossed the street, went up her walk, and knocked. She opened the door in 11 seconds. He counted without meaning to. Blazer. Still in the blazer at 9 at night. Her right hand was wrapped in a paper towel with a spreading red stain, and she was holding it slightly away from her body, with the brisk practicality of a woman who was already internally categorizing this as a minor inconvenience. Her eyes went to his face. She read his expression in about 1 second. I'm fine, she said. It was a glass. I was moving too fast. You're bleeding through the paper towel. It looks worse than Victoria. He said her name for the first time. Something shifted in her face when he did. Something quick and unguarded. Do you have a first aid kit? A beat. She stepped back from the door. Hall closet, she said. Second shelf. The kit was exactly where she said, organized, well-stocked, the kind of kit belonging to someone who had thought through emergencies in advance. He brought it to the kitchen island, and she sat across from him and held out her hand with the expression of a woman exercising significant conscious patience. He unwrapped the paper towel. The cut was clean, not deep, no glass visible, bleeding slowed already. He cleaned it methodically, and she held perfectly still, watching his hands. You're good at this, she said. Lily made me take a first aid course with her last spring. She was deeply invested in my preparedness. Something moved across Victoria's face. Tender. Gone fast. She worries about you. She supervises me. He looked up. There's a difference. Victoria was quiet for a moment. She's lucky. I'm the lucky one. He pressed the bandage down along its edges and sat back. She looked at her hand. She looked at him. There was something in the air between them that hadn't been there 30 seconds ago, the particular atmosphere of a room where two people have just been briefly, genuinely close. You didn't have to come, she said. I heard the glass. Most people would assume it was nothing. Most people, he said carefully, wouldn't have been on their back porch at 9 at night not reading. Her eyes sharpened. Excuse me. I had a book. I wasn't reading it. He stood, snapped the kit closed. It happens. She looked at him for a long, unreadable moment. Why weren't you reading it? He picked up the kit. Looked at her directly, the way she always looked at him, level and without armor. I'm not sure yet, he said honestly. But I think you know. He set the kit on the counter. Lock your door when I leave, he said. And get some sleep. He crossed the street in the dark, went back to his porch, found his page, and sat with his book open and the words completely invisible. Across the street, Victoria Calloway's kitchen light stayed on until midnight. And for the first time in 3 years, Daniel Mercer did not mind being kept awake. The bandage was still on her hand 4 days later. Daniel knew this because Scout escaped again on Wednesday morning. Same move, same full sprint defection, same complete indifference to the whistle. And this time, Daniel was in his front yard. When it happened, crouched over a section of edging that had been bothering him for 2 weeks. Scout arrived at his side like a dog returning to a place he'd already decided was home. And Victoria followed with the leash and the particular expression of a woman who was genuinely reconsidering her relationship with this animal. He likes your yard, she said. My yard has better grass, Daniel said. I spent 3 summers on it. That's what he's communicating. that your landscaping choices were correct." Daniel looked up at her. The bandage on her right hand was clean changed but still there. The cut had been small. He knew how small, but she was clearly being careful with it, and something about that small evidence of care that she had followed through settled something in him. "How's the hand?" he asked. "Fine." She said it the way she said most things about herself, quickly conclusively moving past it before anyone could press. Scout come. Scout did not come. "He's decided," Daniel said. "He decides things constantly. It's his primary personality trait." She looked at the dog with an expression that was trying very hard to be irritation and kept sliding toward affection. "I had a Labrador growing up, completely obedient, did everything I asked. And I thought I wanted that again." She paused. "Turns out what I wanted was something that didn't just do what I asked." She said it without looking at him. Clipped Scout's leash on. Walked back toward her house. But at the edge of the yard, she stopped just briefly, not turning fully around, and said, "There's a farmer's market on Elm Saturday morning. Lily mentioned she's never been." Daniel straightened up from the edging. "Lily mentions a lot of things to people." 8:45, Victoria said, and then she was gone. He stood in his yard for a moment with his edging tool in his hand, and the distinct sensation of a man who had just been issued both an invitation and a challenge, and wasn't entirely sure which one he was more afraid of. He told himself he'd think about it. He went inside and immediately told Lily. Lily's response was to stop eating her cereal, look at him with enormous eyes, and say, "I knew it." "Knew what?" "That she liked us. She invited us to a farmer's market, Lily. It's not—" She remembered what I told her. She picked up her spoon with quiet satisfaction. People only remember the things that matter to them. Daniel looked at his 8-year-old daughter. "Finish your cereal," he said. But he was at Victoria's door at 8:43 on Saturday morning, Lily beside him holding a canvas bag she had packed herself with reusable containers because she had explained with great seriousness they might find jams. Victoria opened the door, already ready, coat on Scout's leash in hand. Coffee travel mug, that same composed efficiency, and she looked at Lily first, then at Daniel, and there was something in the order of that glance that he filed away and didn't examine yet. "You brought containers," Victoria said to Lily. "For jam," Lily explained. "And possibly honey. Dad says I can get one thing, but I'm planning to negotiate." Victoria looked at Daniel. "Good luck," she told him. It was the warmest thing she'd said to him yet. The farmer's market was 30 minutes of the most unexpectedly complicated ease Daniel had experienced in years. Complicated because he was aware constantly, specifically aware of Victoria beside him. The way she moved through a crowd, efficient and purposeful, but how she slowed for Lily, without making it obvious she was slowing. How she tasted a sample of apple cider vinegar at a booth and made a face of genuine involuntary disgust, and then bought a bottle anyway because the vendor was 80 years old and had been making it for 40 years. How she talked to people, vendors, a woman with a baby, an older man selling woodwork, with a directness that could have been coldness, and wasn't because she was also genuinely listening. And Lily. Lily moved between them like a small planet with its own gravitational pull, reporting back from booths, asking Victoria questions, with the cheerful relentlessness of a child who had decided this person was interesting and intended to find out everything. "What's your favorite food?" "Depends on the day." "What's your job exactly?" "I help companies figure out how to talk to people." "Are you good at it?" A pause. "Most of the time." "Are you married?" Daniel said. Lily. "No." Victoria said. Simple. No weight on it, no deflection. Just the answer. Lily processed this with a thoughtful nod. "My dad's not married either. He was, but then he wasn't. He says it made him sad for a long time, but now he's okay." The silence that landed between the three of them lasted approximately 2 seconds and felt considerably longer. "Lily," Daniel said quietly. "It's true." Lily said, not defensively, just factually. "You said I should always tell the truth." Victoria looked at Daniel. He expected something careful, something managed. Instead, she said simply, "She's right." True things are worth saying. And Daniel, standing between his daughter and this woman he barely knew, in the middle of a Saturday farmer's market, felt the specific sensation of a wall he'd been leaning against for 3 years, shifting slightly. Not falling, just shifting, becoming less certain of its own necessity. They ended up staying 2 hours. Lily got her jam, and her honey. She had indeed negotiated. Walking back, Lily ran ahead with Scout. Victoria had handed her the leash with minimal prompting and maximum trust, and Daniel and Victoria fell into a pace beside each other that was neither close nor distant, but felt to him deliberate on both their parts. "She's extraordinary," Victoria said. "She makes everything easier and harder at the same time. That's what love does." She said it without sentimentality, just observation, and then, "You said the divorce made you sad for a long time." He looked at her. She shouldn't have said that. She was right, though. The quiet stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but loaded. "It did," he said finally. "Not the way people expect. It wasn't rage or devastation. It was more like discovering that you've been living in a smaller version of yourself for so long that you don't know what the full-size version looks like anymore." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Ahead of them, Lily was laughing at something Scout had done. "I know that feeling," Victoria said, and she said it with a certainty and a flatness that told him it was not an abstract empathy. It was recognition. He didn't ask, not yet. But something passed between them in that moment, an acknowledgement. "I see that you've been somewhere hard. I've been somewhere hard too." No details exchanged, no vulnerability performed. Just two people briefly standing in the same truth. When they reached her door, Lily hugged Scout goodbye, with the conviction of someone who intended to see him again very soon. And Victoria looked down at her with an expression that made Daniel's chest do something complicated. "Same time in 2 weeks," Lily said, looking up at Victoria. Victoria looked at Daniel. He met her eyes and held them and said nothing, leaving the answer entirely to her. "Same time," Victoria said. "Bring more containers." Lily pumped her fist and pulled Daniel toward home, and he went, and he didn't look back, and he absolutely knew Victoria was watching them go. The shift after that morning was gradual and then sudden. The gradual part was this: they started talking. Not the careful surface-level exchanges of neighbors being polite, but actual talking, the kind that happened in the driveway when he was getting groceries and she was coming back from a run, and somehow 30 minutes disappeared. The kind that happened over the fence on evenings when Lily was doing homework inside, and Scout was lying in the grass between their yards, looking satisfied with himself. Small exchanges that kept going longer than small exchanges, should neither of them acknowledging that they were choosing to stay. She told him things in the way that private people tell things sideways, without announcement embedded in other sentences. That she'd started her company at 31 with one client and a used laptop. That she hadn't taken a real vacation in 4 years. That she was building something in this house, not renovating. She was specific about the word building. Making it hers in a way something hadn't been hers in a long time. He told her things too. That Lily's mother Claire was a good person who had loved him and simply stopped being in love with him, and that the hardest part had been finding no villain in the story. That he'd started therapy at 42, feeling embarrassed about it, and found it was the most useful thing he'd ever done. That some mornings he woke up with his life feeling genuinely full, and some mornings the quiet of the house was the loudest sound he'd ever heard. She listened to that last one without filling the silence after it, which was, he was learning one of the most significant things she did. Victoria Calloway did not rush past uncomfortable truths. She let them exist. The sudden part happened on a Thursday evening. He was coming back from picking up Lily from her after-school art class. Lily with paint on her sleeve and an elaborate story about a disagreement with a classmate that had required significant diplomatic mediation. And he turned onto Maple Creek Drive to find an unfamiliar car parked in front of Victoria's house. New, dark, expensive in an ostentatious way. A man was standing on her front step, tall, well-dressed, the specific well-dressed of someone who spent money on clothes in order to be noticed spending money. Dark hair, Early 40s, broad shoulders, the kind of posture that came from a lifetime of assuming rooms were his to own. Victoria was in the doorway, not letting him in. Her posture was different. It was the first time Daniel had ever seen her posture change. Not fear, not exactly. Something older than fear. Wariness that lived in the body. Daniel pulled into his driveway. The man on Victoria's step didn't notice him. Victoria did. Her eyes moved to him for exactly 1 second, then back to the man in front of her. "Lily," Daniel said. "Go inside. Start your homework." Lily looked at the scene across the street with the sharply accurate perception of a child who understood more than adults wanted her to. "Is she okay?" "Go inside." Lily went inside. Daniel got out of the car slowly. He did not cross the street. He stood in his driveway and didn't pretend he wasn't watching because he wasn't going to pretend. And somewhere in the part of his brain that was still operational under the specific tension, now moving through his chest, he understood that pretending was exactly what this man counted on other people looking away. He heard fragments. The man's voice was smooth, practiced the voice of someone who had learned to make pressure sound like reason. Not asking for anything dramatic, Vic just, "Don't call me that. You left so fast, there are things we still need to. We have nothing we need. You're being unreasonable." And there it was. Unreasonable. The word that men like this deployed like a tool designed to make a woman doubt the very perception that was protecting her. Daniel watched Victoria's jaw tighten. He watched her hand, her right hand, the one he'd bandaged, grip the doorframe. She was not going to ask for help. He knew this absolutely. Asking for help was not something this woman did, not from him, not from anyone, not when it made her look like she couldn't manage her own life. So he didn't make her ask. He walked across the street, not fast, not aggressive, just direct, the same directness she herself used going somewhere because he'd decided to go there, and he came up the front walk, and he looked at the man on her step, and he said evenly, "Hey, everything good over here?" The man turned. Up close, he was good-looking in a practiced way, and his eyes moved over Daniel with the quick, calculating assessment of someone measuring a variable. "Private conversation," he said. "Sure." Daniel looked at Victoria. Just her. He didn't perform anything. He just looked at her and waited. "Victoria, you need anything?" The man's expression shifted. "She's fine. Who are—" "I'm asking her," Daniel said. Still looking at Victoria. "Not you." Victoria looked at him. Something in her face, that controlled, managed, perfectly composed face, flickered. Something that was not weakness and was not gratitude, but was something close to both, something underneath, both something she almost immediately put back where it came from. "I'm fine," she said, and then to the man, "We're done, Ryan. Don't come back here." Ryan looked between them. His jaw moved. He recalibrated visibly from wounded romantic to something colder. "You moved to the suburbs and found yourself a Ryan." Victoria's voice dropped one register and became something that would stop most conversations cold. "Leave." He left. Not quickly, slowly, deliberately performing dignity on his way out. He got in the expensive car and pulled away without looking back. Which was, Daniel thought, the move of a man who had rehearsed it. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Victoria was looking at the place where the car had been. Her grip on the doorframe had loosened, but she hadn't moved. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. I had it handled." "I know that too." She looked at him, then really looked at him, and he held the look without explaining himself or apologizing for having come over. "Who is he?" Daniel asked quietly. A long pause. Scout had appeared at her leg from somewhere inside, leaning against her with the gentle insistence of an animal who understood that his person needed weight right now. "Someone I spent 2 years trying to make work," she said. "Someone who only came here because I'm no longer making it easy to control the story." Daniel nodded. He didn't push. He didn't catalog the information or analyze it aloud or offer an opinion because she hadn't asked for any of those things. She'd answered what he asked, and he was going to respect where she drew the line. "Okay," he said. She exhaled, just slightly, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. You're not going to ask for details. The question was careful, like she'd expected a different response and was recalibrating. You'll tell me when you want to tell me, he said. I'm not going anywhere. Something crossed her face, complicated, layered, the expression of a person who had been told things like that before and learned at significant cost to be careful about believing them. Don't make promises like that casually, she said. I don't. He held her gaze. Ask Lily. I'm boring on purpose. I do what I say I'll do. For a moment, just a moment, something in her expression broke open slightly. Not a crack. More like a door briefly ajar, showing something real and unguarded, before she quietly pulled it closed. Go be with your daughter, she said. Yeah. He stepped back off her porch. Lock your door. You always say that. You never argue with it. He walked back across the street. Behind him, he heard her door close, not slam, just close, the sound of a woman securing her space, and then the bolt turning. Inside, Lily was at the kitchen table with her homework, and the very deliberate expression of a child who had been watching from the window and was choosing not to say anything about it. Daniel set his keys on the counter. She okay? Lily asked, not looking up from her worksheet. She's okay. Lily nodded, kept writing. Then quietly, without inflection, You like her dad. Daniel opened the refrigerator and stared into it for several seconds. Homework, he said. I am doing my homework. A pause. You do, though. He closed the refrigerator. He sat down across from her at the table and looked at his daughter, this small, precise person who watched everything and remembered everything, and was in this moment seeing him with the particular clarity of someone who had nothing to protect. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. Lily looked up at him. Her expression was not triumphant and not teasing. It was something softer. Good, she said. She needs someone who shows up. Daniel looked at his daughter. So do you, he said. You always show up for me. She went back to her worksheet. Now you just have to do it for someone else, too. He sat with that for a while. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, across the street, the light in Victoria Calloway's front room stayed on, and Daniel did not look at it, and it was the most conscious decision he made all evening. 3 weeks after Ryan's visit, Victoria stopped locking her front door before 10. Daniel noticed, because Scout started appearing at the fence line earlier in the evenings. Not escaped, just present nose through the slats waiting, and Victoria would follow 5 minutes later with 2 mugs of coffee, one of which she handed over the fence without asking if he wanted it. He always wanted it. She seemed to know this without discussing it, the same way she knew he took it black, the same way he knew she took hers with exactly 1 sugar, even though she'd never once mentioned it. This was the thing that had quietly happened between them. They had learned each other's details without making a project of it. The small true facts that accumulate when 2 people stop performing and start simply existing near each other. He knew she worked through lunch every day without exception, and then regretted it by 3 in the afternoon. He knew the particular silence that meant she'd had a hard call. Not angry, just compressed, like someone who had been holding a professional face on for hours and needed 60 seconds of not performing it. He knew Scout slept at the foot of her bed, and that she'd initially said he wasn't allowed on the furniture, and that this rule had lasted 11 days. She knew Daniel made Lily's lunch the night before because mornings were hard, and he refused to let that be her problem. She knew he was rebuilding a relationship with his brother in Cincinnati that had gone quiet during the divorce years, and that he called him every Sunday evening now, and that the calls were getting easier. She knew he had a habit of standing in the kitchen in the dark for 5 minutes before turning the lights on in the morning, just standing there in the quiet, and that this was not sadness. It was the way he collected himself before the day began. Neither of them talked about what they were doing. This was, Daniel understood, both the best and the most precarious thing about where they were. The not naming of it gave it room to breathe. It also gave it room to be misread, to be walked back, to be reclassified as friendship if either of them needed the exit. He was aware that he did not want the exit. He was also aware that Victoria was carrying something she hadn't told him yet. Something that lived in the careful distance she still maintained. Not coldness, not disinterest, but a specific restraint that a person develops when they've been burned in a way that reorganized their understanding of what trust costs. He didn't push. He showed up. He let her set the pace. And then Mrs. Huang announced the block party. Mrs. Huang announced it the way she announced everything, with printed flyers, personal delivery to every door, and the unmistakable energy of a woman who believed community was a muscle that required regular exercise. The first Saturday of August, the cul-de-sac. Everyone was expected to bring something which was not a suggestion. She put "expected" in bold, Victoria said, standing on her porch with the flyer 2 evenings before the event. Scout was doing his habitual lean against Daniel's leg. Not encouraged. Expected. She means it, Daniel said. First year I was here, I brought store-bought potato salad. What happened? She thanked me very warmly and then looked at the container for 1 extra second. Victoria looked up from the flyer. 1 second. 1 long second. The corner of her mouth moved. I'll make something real. You cook? I'm capable of cooking. I choose not to most of the time because it requires planning ahead, and I am professionally allergic to planning things I don't have to plan. She folded the flyer. But I can make a very good peach galette. Lily will lose her mind. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then, is she coming to the party? Of course. She's been talking about it for a week. Mrs. Huang gave her a special assignment to help set up the table decorations, which she treats like a presidential appointment. Victoria smiled, a real one, unhurried, the kind that happened when she wasn't managing her own face. It still did something significant to the air when it happened. Daniel was no longer surprised by this. He had simply accepted it as a fact of his current life, the way you accept weather. I'll make 2 galettes, Victoria said. 1 for the party and 1 for Lily. He looked at her. You don't have to do that. I know I don't. She met his eyes. Level, clear. That's why I'm doing it. He held her gaze for a moment, that specific held gaze that had become its own language between them, the one that said things neither of them had put into words yet. Then he nodded. She nodded back. And they stood there in the easy quiet. That was, he thought, the most honest thing he'd experienced in years. He did not know that in 36 hours that quiet would be blown completely apart. The block party started at 4. By 4:30, Maple Creek Drive had transformed into the version of itself that only existed a few times a year, folding tables along the cul-de-sac, kids running between the legs of adults who were pretending to supervise them, someone's speaker playing something from the 90s that nobody complained about. The air smelled like charcoal and cut grass, and Victoria's galettes, which Mrs. Huang had greeted with the specific approval she reserved for people who understood what effort meant. Lily was in her element. She had spent 45 minutes arranging the table decorations with the focused seriousness of an event planner, and was now running with the Huang kids and 2 others from the next block, Scout moving with them in a state of pure animal joy. Daniel stood near the food table with Marcus, who had come because Daniel had invited him, and also because Marcus never missed a social event within a 3-block radius. There she is, Marcus said. He meant Victoria. She was across the cul-de-sac talking to Tom Ellison from number 9, who was a retired contractor, and who talked to everyone for 20 minutes minimum. She was listening with real attention the way she did, and she had her coffee. She'd switched from wine because she'd mentioned once that alcohol at outdoor events in summer gave her headaches, and she refused to spend Sunday being regretful about Saturday. Stop, Daniel said. I'm just observing. You're narrating. I'm observing and narrating. Those are different skills. Marcus sipped his drink. She looked for you when she walked in. Marcus. 2 seconds quick scan found you relaxed. I saw it. Daniel said nothing because there was nothing to say that wouldn't confirm it. You need to tell her, Marcus said. Tell her what? Daniel, come on. It's not... He stopped. It's complicated. All the things worth doing are complicated. That's not a reason. Marcus looked at him with the direct affection of a person who has known you long enough to skip the diplomatic version. You have been careful for 3 years. You have been responsible and steady and good, and you have been careful. At some point, careful becomes a way of making sure you never get hurt again. And that's not brave, man. That's just a different kind of hiding. Daniel stood with that. He didn't answer because Marcus was not wrong, and arguing with things that weren't wrong was a waste of both their time. Across the cul-de-sac, Victoria had broken free from Tom Ellison and was now crouching down to say something to Lily, who had run up to her with a pinwheel from the decoration table. Lily was demonstrating how the pinwheel worked, spinning it toward Victoria's face with great enthusiasm. Victoria took it gently and spun it herself slowly, watching it turn, and the expression on her face in that unguarded moment was something Daniel had not seen before, open and young and quietly longing in a way she would never have permitted herself if she knew she was being watched. Something moved through his chest, slow and certain. The specific recognition of a man who has been lying to himself about the size of something. He wasn't falling. He had already fallen. Somewhere between the upside-down oil filter and the bandaged hand and the farmer's market and 2 mugs of coffee over a fence in the evening quiet, he had completely and irreversibly fallen, and the only thing he had been managing since then was the decision about what to do about it. He was still working on that decision when the black car turned onto Maple Creek Drive. He recognized it before he fully processed what he was seeing. Dark, expensive, the specific vehicle of a man who chose his props carefully. It parked at the edge of the cul-de-sac, in a spot that wasn't really a spot the way people park when they want to make an entrance rather than a visit. Ryan got out. He was dressed well, weekend casual, done with too much intention, the outfit of someone who had thought about how he would look here. He scanned the party with a practiced eye and found Victoria in 6 seconds. Daniel watched him find her. He watched Victoria's back go still. She had seen the car, he understood, before she turned around. You didn't survive 2 years with a person like that without developing a sensitivity to their approach, a kind of early warning system built from experience. She turned slowly, and her face did the thing Daniel had seen once before on her front porch. Not fear, but the older thing, the body's memory of what this person cost. Marcus had gone quiet beside him. Is that... Yeah, Daniel said. What's he doing here? Making a point. Daniel set down his drink. That's what he does. Ryan moved through the party with social ease that was almost impressive, nodding to people he'd never met, picking up a plate like he belonged, making his way toward Victoria with the unhurried confidence of a man who had decided how this would go. He stopped in front of her, said something, smiled. Victoria did not smile back. Daniel started walking. Not running, not rushing, but moving, because standing still was no longer something he was willing to do. He heard Ryan's voice as he got close, smooth and public-facing, pitched for an audience which was deliberate. Just wanted to return some things that are yours. I thought a neighborhood party was actually a nice low-pressure way to... You weren't invited, Victoria said. I heard about it from Janet. You remember Janet? She knows Tom Ellison. It's a small... Ryan. Her voice was flat. You tracked down how to find a party I didn't tell you about. That's not a coincidence. That's a choice. His expression shifted just slightly, just enough. You're making this into something it isn't. No, she said. I'm describing exactly what it is. Daniel stopped beside her. Not in front of her. Beside her. Ryan looked at him. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Daniel, Victoria said without looking at him, but the way she said it, even present like an anchor word, told him everything he needed to know about what his being there meant to her. Hey, Daniel said to Ryan. Calm. Completely calm. I don't think we've been introduced. We haven't, Ryan said. Daniel Mercer. I live across the street. He kept his hands easy at his sides. No aggression, no posturing, just a man standing next to someone he was not going to leave standing alone. This is a private neighborhood event. You should probably head out. Ryan looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Victoria. He smiled the smile of a man recalculating storing something for later use. So this is why. Ryan said. To Victoria. Quietly, but with an edge designed to cut. You left everything we built, and you're what? Playing house in the suburbs. I left, Victoria said, because you confused love with ownership, and I'm done having this conversation. You're not done. You still have... He reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope, set it on the food table between them like a move in a game. The agreement your lawyers sent. I haven't signed it. I wanted to do this in person. I wanted you to know that I'm not just going to leave it. Her voice didn't shake. Leave it and leave. Victoria. She said leave it. Daniel's voice was still even, still quiet. And she said leave. I'd take both of those seriously. Ryan looked at him with the particular contempt of a man who has underestimated someone and knows it and chooses contempt as the response. You have no idea what you're involved in. I know enough, Daniel said. I know she doesn't want you here. That's sufficient. The cul-de-sac had gone quieter around them. Not silent music still played. Kids still ran, but the adults nearby had shifted the way crowds do when they sense something real happening and aren't sure whether to intervene or witness. Ryan looked around. He registered the audience. And something in him recalculated once more the social cost of pressing further here now with people watching. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Victoria one last time, and what was in his face was not love, and had probably never been love, but rather the expression of a man who has lost something he considered his property and has not yet decided what to do about it. You'll need to sign eventually, he said. My lawyers will handle it, she said. Like they've been trying to handle it for 4 months while you've been stalling. He walked away, back through the party, back to his car, pulled out with the same deliberate slowness. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Mrs. Huang appeared from approximately nowhere, touched Victoria's arm gently and said, Let me get you some water, sweetheart, and moved off before Victoria could decline. Victoria was looking at the envelope on the table. Her hands were at her sides, and they were perfectly still, but her breathing was slightly shallower than normal, and Daniel could see because he had learned to see her the specific quality of someone holding something together through sheer force of practiced will. The agreement, she said. It's about the company. He waited. We were engaged. He invested in my company early on before I knew exactly who he was. He's been claiming partial ownership. She said it cleanly, like a briefing, like the facts of someone else's life. His lawyers have been sending variations of the same bad faith offer for months. He won't sign a clean exit because as long as it's unresolved, he has a reason to contact me. Daniel understood this immediately and completely. It's not about the company. No, she said. It's not. She picked up the envelope, looked at it. It's about making me feel like I can't be fully free of him. Like there's always a door he can open. She set it back down. I knew what he was doing. A pause. Something cracked slightly under the surface of her composure. I didn't expect him here. In this place. Around these people. Around Lily. She didn't say it. He heard it. He doesn't get to have this, Daniel said quietly. She looked at him. This street, this party, this... He gestured small at the cul-de-sac around them. He doesn't get to contaminate what's here just because he showed up in it. She stared at him for a moment. Her eyes were bright in a way he hadn't seen before. Not tears, not quite, but the precursor to tears from a woman who did not cry in public and had made peace with that choice. Daniel, she said, and his name in her mouth landed the same way it had the night he bandaged her hand, like something real, like a door opening. Yeah, he said. She looked at him with the full weight of someone who has spent a long time keeping people at the exact right distance and is now consciously precisely choosing something different. Thank you, she said. Not for coming over. Not for standing beside her. For all of it. For every coffee over the fence and every evening and the oil filter and the first aid kit and the farmer's market and the being there and the not pushing and the showing up. All of it in 2 words, because she was not a woman who needed more words than were necessary. He nodded. Always. She reached out and took his hand. Not a dramatic gesture, just her fingers closing around his, brief and certain, a decision made and communicated with the precision she brought to everything. Then she let go. Across the cul-de-sac, Lily was watching them. When Daniel's eyes found hers, she very deliberately looked away up at the sky, with the elaborate innocence of a child who had absolutely been watching and was choosing to be subtle about it. Scout sat between Daniel and Victoria's feet, leaning against both of them, perfectly content. The evening continued. The music played. Mrs. Huang's potato salad, homemade, it went without saying, was consumed entirely. Victoria's galettes disappeared in 20 minutes, and she stood there with the empty pan, looking faintly startled by this, by the evidence of having made something that people wanted, by the simple fact of being here in this place and having it feel like hers. Later, when the tables were folded and the kids had wound down and the neighbors drifted home in ones and twos, Daniel and Victoria sat on her front step, with Scout between them, while Lily dozed on Daniel's jacket on the grass nearby, and the street went quiet around them. "He'll sign eventually," Victoria said. She was talking about Ryan, but she wasn't really talking about Ryan anymore. "He will," Daniel said. "And then it's done. And then it's done." She was quiet. Then, "I don't talk about it. The company, the engagement, all of it. I spent so long keeping it clean and managed and not letting it be something people pitied me for." "I don't pity you." "I know." She turned to look at him. "That's why I'm telling you." He held her gaze. In the low evening light, her face was open in a way he'd only seen in unguarded flashes before. No performance, no management, just the actual woman, tired and real and extraordinary. "I left him 6 weeks before the wedding," she said. "Everyone thought I was having a breakdown. My mother, my board, his entire family. They all had theories about why I was confused. Nobody considered that I was the only one in that situation who was thinking clearly." "What made you leave?" He asked it the way she asked things, quietly, with genuine interest, leaving room for her not to answer. She was quiet for a long moment. "He told me," she said slowly, "that the company would never have made it without him. That my success had his fingerprints on it. That I should be grateful." She paused. "And I realized, sitting there, that I had spent 2 years making myself smaller so that he could feel larger. And I thought, I am not grateful for that. I am angry." And I left the next morning. Daniel was quiet. "You weren't confused," he said. "No," she said. "I was finally the opposite of confused." They sat with that. Scout breathed. Lily shifted on the grass and resettled without waking. "The fence gate," Victoria said after a while. "What about it?" "The one between our yards. The latch is broken. Has been since I moved in." She paused. "I was going to fix it." "I can fix it," he said. "I know you can." She looked at him sideways. "I was going to. But I keep not getting around to it." He understood what she was saying. He understood it completely. The broken latch that she had not fixed. The door between their yards, never quite closed. "Leave it," he said. She looked at him. Something in her face, that final remaining careful distance, that last managed inch of space she'd been holding, quietly dissolved. "Leave it," she agreed. Lily, from the grass without opening her eyes, said, "Finally." Daniel looked at his daughter. Victoria pressed her hand over her mouth to hold in a laugh and failed. And on Maple Creek Drive, in the late summer dark, something that had been building for months arrived at the only place it was ever going. The latch stayed broken. Nobody mentioned it again, but nobody needed to. Scout used the gap freely, now moving between the 2 yards with the sovereign confidence of an animal who had decided the fence was a formality. Lily followed him most afternoons after school, doing homework at Victoria's kitchen island, while Victoria worked at the other end with her laptop and her 1-sugar coffee, and the two of them existed in a parallel quiet that Daniel, watching from across the yard some evenings, found almost unbearable in the best possible way. He and Victoria had not talked about what had shifted on the front step after the block party. They hadn't needed to. Something had been named not in words, but in the broken latch and the held hand. And Lily's perfectly timed finally, and the naming of it had changed the air between them in a way that couldn't be unnamed. But Daniel was also a man who had learned at considerable personal cost that things felt real before they were stable. That warmth and proximity were not the same as readiness. That two people could want the same thing and still be standing in completely different places inside themselves. So he watched. He showed up. He let it breathe. Victoria was the one who broke the careful equilibrium, and she did it on a Sunday morning when he least expected it. He was reading at the kitchen table, actually reading for once, the book open, and his attention genuinely in it when his phone rang. Victoria's name on the screen. He answered on the second ring. "I need you to come over," she said. No greeting, no preamble. Her voice was even, but underneath the evenness was something raw and pressurized, the voice of someone who had been holding something alone all morning and had reached the limit of what alone could manage. "Give me 2 minutes," he said. He told Lily, who was watching cartoons, and simply said, "Okay," with the composure of a child who had been quietly prepared for exactly this kind of morning. He crossed the street. He knocked. She opened the door in her pajamas, the first time he'd ever seen her, without the armor of professional clothes, and she looked like someone who had been awake since 4 and had been losing an argument with herself ever since. On her kitchen table was a box, not large. Cream-colored, the kind of box that comes from a stationery company, tied with a ribbon that had been untied and retied several times judging by the state of it. Beside the box was a mug of cold coffee and a phone face down. Daniel sat down across from the box. Victoria sat across from him. Scout was already under the table, pressed against her feet. "Ryan signed," she said. He looked up from the box. "When?" "Friday night. His lawyer sent the final paperwork. Clean exit. Full ownership reverts to me." She said it without celebration, which told him everything about where she actually was right now. "It's done. The company is completely mine again." "That's good," Daniel said carefully. "It is." She looked at the box. "And then I couldn't sleep. And I got this out of the closet at 3 in the morning, and I've been sitting here with it ever since, and She stopped. "I didn't want to do this alone." He looked at the box. He understood suddenly what it was. Not from anything she'd told him, from the way she was sitting with it. The particular posture of someone in the presence of a thing that still had power. "You don't have to open it," he said. "I've been not opening it for 8 months." Her jaw tightened. "I moved it from the condo to this house and I put it in the closet, and every time I saw it I thought, not yet, not yet." She looked at him. "But Ryan signed and the legal piece is closed, and I thought, if I don't do this now, I'm going to keep carrying it like it weighs nothing, and it doesn't weigh nothing, Daniel. It weighs everything." He nodded. He didn't say anything else. He just stayed there, present, waiting. She untied the ribbon for the last time and opened the box. Inside, an ivory wedding invitation, the kind that cost more per envelope than most people spent on dinner. A stack of photos rubber-banded face down. A folded document that was, he guessed, some version of the vows. A small jewelry box, velvet, which she moved to the side without opening. And at the bottom, a letter handwritten in an envelope with her name on the front in script that was not her own. She picked up the invitation first. Read it. Set it down with the careful flatness of someone putting something away permanently. "I planned it for 2 years," she said. "Every detail. Because that's what I do. I'm good at execution, at making things happen, at building something from nothing, and making it look inevitable." She touched the edge of the invitation. "And somewhere in those 2 years of building it, I stopped asking whether I actually wanted it. The wedding became the project, and I was very, very good at the project." "When did you know," Daniel asked, "that I didn't want it?" She was quiet for a moment. "There was a Tuesday, 4 months before. I was in a meeting with my team. We'd just closed the biggest contract of the year, and everyone was celebrating, and I was thinking about the seating chart. Not the contract, the seating chart." She looked up. "And I thought, why is this the thing in my head right now? And the answer was because the wedding was the thing I was managing instead of my own life, and Ryan was the project I was running instead of a relationship I was in." She paused. I stayed 4 more months anyway, because leaving felt like failure, because people were going to think I'd broken down, because he was going to tell the story his way, and I'd spent my whole career making sure other people's stories were told right, and I couldn't control my own. Daniel looked at her. What did he tell people? That I was overwhelmed, that the pressure of the company had gotten to me, that he'd been worried about my mental health for months. She said it without anger that had been done, processed, folded away. What remained was something flatter and more permanent. He was very good at it, very sympathetic, very concerned. She picked up the stack of photos and then, without looking at them, set them directly into the box on the table beside her. Face down. Done. You're not going to look at them, Daniel said. I already know what's in them, she said. 2 people performing happiness. I was very convincing. She picked up the letter, turned it over in her hands. This is the one I wrote to myself, the week I left. I wrote it so I'd remember why, for the moments when I second-guessed myself. She set it on the table, pushed it toward him. Read it. He looked at it. Victoria, I want you to. She met his eyes directly. I want someone who knows me now to know who I was then. He picked up the letter. He read it. It was 3 pages, handwritten in her precise, slightly compressed script. He read it all. She watched him read it without speaking. What was in the letter was a woman talking to herself with the brutal honesty that people only access when they have nothing left to protect her own fear, written out plainly, her understanding of what she'd allowed her anger at herself for, the allowing. And underneath all of it, underneath the accounting of every compromise and every swallowed objection, and every morning she'd woken up smaller than the day before, a single sentence near the end that stopped him completely. He read it twice. He set the letter down. You wrote, he said quietly. I don't know if I know how to let someone be kind to me without waiting for what it costs. She held his gaze. I wrote that. Is it still true? The silence lasted long enough to mean something. Scout shifted under the table. Less, she said. Since July, considerably less. He looked at her across the table. This woman in her pajamas at 9 on a Sunday morning with a box of her hardest year between them, who had called him instead of sitting with it alone, who had handed him a letter she'd written to herself, because she wanted to be fully known, and was at significant personal cost choosing to trust that. You don't have to be small here, he said. Not with me, not ever. Her breath caught, just slightly, just enough. I know, she said. That's the terrifying part. She picked up the jewelry box, opened it this time. Inside was an engagement ring, large, beautiful, expensive. She looked at it for a moment with no expression he could read, and then she closed the box and set it aside. I'm donating it, she said. There's a resale program that funds domestic violence legal services. A pause. It seemed right. He nodded. It is right. She put everything back in the cream box: invitation photos, vows, letter, and she closed it and tied the ribbon and set it on the counter. Not in the closet. On the counter. A thing being dealt with, not stored. I'm going to shower, she said, standing. And then I'm going to eat something. I haven't eaten since yesterday at lunch. She looked at him. Stay. I'll make breakfast, he said. You don't have to. Victoria. He said it the way she had first said his name, like a fact, like a door. I want to. She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded once and went upstairs. He made breakfast in her kitchen with the ease of a man who had spent enough time in a space to know where things were kept. Eggs, toast, the good butter she kept on the second shelf, because she'd told him once that cold butter on toast was a moral failure. He found a pan. He found a spatula. He made enough for both of them and set it on the table and poured 2 coffees, black, 1 sugar, and sat down to wait. She came downstairs in 12 minutes, hair down the first time he'd seen it down, and she looked younger and less armored and entirely herself. She looked at the table, at the 2 plates, at the 2 coffees. You remembered the sugar, she said. 1. Always. She sat down. She ate. He ate. They talked about small things. Scout's latest escape route, the rosebush in her front yard that she'd been threatening to address for weeks. Lily's school project about state history that had somehow evolved into a 40-page personal manifesto about Ohio's underrepresentation in popular culture. And then in the middle of this, Victoria said, "I want to tell you something, and I need you to just let me finish before you say anything." He set down his fork. "Okay." She looked at her plate, then at him. "When I moved here, when I bought this house and left the condo and drove away from everything that had been my life for 3 years, I told myself I was starting over. Clean slate, no entanglements. I was going to rebuild the company with full ownership and live quietly and not let anyone close enough to cost me anything." She paused. "And then Scout decided you were trustworthy, which I resented on principle." He said nothing. "And then your daughter told a stranger her father cried at Charlotte's Web and claimed it was allergies, and I thought that's a man who feels things and doesn't know what to do with them." Which I understood. She looked at him levelly. "And then you came over with a first aid kit at 9 at night and sat across from me and fixed a small cut and didn't make it into anything it wasn't, and I thought I need to be careful. Because this is exactly the kind of person I could stop being careful around." He held very still. "I have been careful," she said, "for months. I have been deliberate and slow, and I have not let myself—" She stopped, started again. "I am not good at this. At the part where you let someone matter. I'm exceptional at most things. This one, I am genuinely not good at." "You're doing it," he said. "I'm doing it badly." "You're doing it scared," he said. "That's not badly. That's the only honest way to do it." She looked at him across the table, her untouched second cup of coffee going cold. Scout's head appearing on the seat beside her, the Sunday morning light coming through the kitchen, the box on the counter with its carefully retied ribbon. "I don't want to make myself smaller for another person," she said. "I will not do that again. I would never ask you to." "You might not mean to, Victoria." He leaned forward slightly. "I have spent 3 years in a house that felt too quiet. I have done the work, I have built the life, I have been responsible and steady and fine." He paused. "I don't want fine anymore. I want what's across the fence. I want the coffee and the broken latch and the arguments about oil filters and watching you become what you're building." He held her gaze. "I want you. All of it. The box in the closet and the phone calls and the dog and the parts you haven't told me yet. I'm not asking you to be smaller. I'm asking you to let me stand next to someone full-sized." The kitchen was very quiet. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. He watched her decide. Not whether she wanted this, he could see that clearly enough, but whether she trusted it, whether she trusted herself inside it, whether the woman in that letter, the one who didn't know if she could receive kindness without waiting for the cost, had healed enough to try. She reached across the table. She put her hand over his. "If you hide," she said quietly, "when it gets real, I won't forgive it." "I won't hide," he said. "If I get difficult," she started. "You're already difficult," he said. "I'm still here." Something broke open in her face, not apart, but open the way a thing breaks when it's been held under pressure and finally safely releases. She laughed a real laugh, surprised out of her shorter and more honest than anything managed, and her hand tightened over his. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. They sat there for a moment, her hand over his, the breakfast half-eaten Scout, sighing under the table, with the deep satisfaction of an animal whose instincts had been vindicated. Then Victoria looked at the window that faced the street and said, "Your daughter is sitting on my front step." Daniel closed his eyes. "She's been out there for 20 minutes, Victoria added. "Of course she has. She brought a book. She's being very subtle. She has never been subtle in her life." He stood. Don't." Victoria stood too. She picked up her coffee. "Let her in. She should eat something too." He looked at her. "She's going to be insufferable about this," he said. "I know." Victoria moved to the back door. "She's earned it," He let Lily in. Lily came through the door, took in the 2 plates and 2 coffees and the general atmosphere of the kitchen, and sat down at the table with the expression of a small person exercising heroic self-restraint. She lasted about 4 seconds. "So," Lily said. "Do you want eggs?" Daniel said. "Yes, please. So." "Lily." "I'm just saying so." Victoria set a plate in front of her. "We heard you," she said, to Lily directly with a warmth in her voice that she didn't bother managing. "And yes." Lily looked up at her. "Yes," Lily said. "Yes," Victoria said. To whatever the question was. Lily looked at her father. She looked at Victoria. She picked up her fork with the composure of a child whose entire project had just succeeded. "Okay," she said. "Good." She ate her eggs. She did not say "I knew it" or "finally" or any of the things she was very obviously thinking, which Daniel recognized as an act of profound personal maturity. He made a note to tell her so later privately, in the way they talked when it was just the 2 of them. The Sunday continued. The box on the counter sat with its retied ribbon dealt with no longer stored. Scout fell asleep across 2 people's feet under the table. Lily finished her eggs and moved on to an unsolicited but remarkably well-organized review of her Ohio history project, which Victoria listened to with genuine attention, and 2 pointed questions that sent Lily into a productive crisis about her thesis statement. And Daniel Mercer sat at a kitchen table that wasn't his in a house across the street from his own, with his daughter and a woman who had spent 8 months learning to stay, and felt with a quiet and unhurried certainty that this was what the full-size version of himself had been waiting to come home to. The box on the counter was the last thing from before. From here, there was only forward. The fence gate got fixed on a Wednesday in September. Not by Daniel, by Lily. She announced this at dinner the previous evening with the calm authority of someone who had made a unilateral decision and was informing the relevant parties as a courtesy. She had watched a 12-minute tutorial. She had confirmed the hardware store on Clement Street carried the right latch, and she had already asked Victoria if it was acceptable, and Victoria had said yes. Daniel looked at his daughter across the dinner table. "You asked her before you asked me. You would have said, 'Let me think about it,'" Lily said. "She said yes immediately." "I might have said yes immediately." "Dad?" She gave him the look, the patient, slightly pitying look of a child who knew her parents' habits better than he did. "You think about everything for 3 days minimum. It's a latch. It takes 20 minutes. He opened his mouth, closed it. "She's not wrong," Victoria said from the doorway, because she had apparently let herself in through the back while this conversation was happening. Scout ahead of her, both of them moving through his house, with the ease of people who had stopped requiring invitation. Daniel looked at Victoria. He looked at his daughter. He looked at his dog, who was now greeting Scout with the tail-wagging enthusiasm of an animal reuniting with his closest colleague, which was rich, given that they had seen each other 4 hours ago. He had gotten a dog in August. A 3-year-old rescue named Bo, medium-sized, deeply calm, the kind of dog who seemed to have arrived already knowing that his job was simply to be steady. Lily had been campaigning for a dog for 2 years, and Daniel had been saying maybe for 2 years, and one morning he'd woken up and thought about the full-size version of himself that he was trying to inhabit, and gone to the shelter that afternoon. Victoria had been with them. She'd sat on the floor of the meet-and-greet room while Lily evaluated every available dog with the thoroughness of a small scientist, and Bo had walked directly to Victoria, put his head in her lap, and looked up at her with the same absolute trust that Scout had shown Daniel on that first Saturday driveway morning. Victoria had looked down at him and said quietly, "This one." And Lily had said, "Obviously." And that had been that. So now there were 2 dogs and 1 broken fence latch, and a 9-year-old who had watched a tutorial and made a decision, and the following Wednesday, the latch was fixed properly, cleanly. Lily working with a focus and precision that Daniel watched from the kitchen window with a fullness in his chest that he didn't try to name because some feelings were bigger than their names. Victoria stood beside him at the window shoulder against his coffee in hand. She's good with her hands, she said. She gets it from her mother, Daniel said. Claire could fix anything mechanical. It skipped me entirely. A pause. They had talked about Claire not extensively, but honestly, the way adults who are building something new together have to talk about the things that came before. Victoria had listened without judgment and without the particular discomfort some people showed when exes were mentioned, because Victoria understood that a life that had happened was not a threat to a life that was happening. She should know that, Victoria said, that she got something good from her mother. He looked at her. I tell her. Good. She sipped her coffee. Outside, Lily tightened the final screw and tested the latch open, close, with the satisfaction of work completed correctly. She's going to be remarkable. She already is. She's going to be more remarkable. Victoria said it with a certainty that was not flattery, but assessment, the voice she used when she was reading something accurately. She's 9, and she already knows who she is. Do you understand how rare that is? Most people spend 40 years figuring out what she already carries. Daniel watched his daughter stand up, dust off her knees, and look at the repaired latch with quiet pride. He thought about the woman beside him saying, I don't know if I know how to let someone be kind to me without waiting for what it costs, written to herself in a letter at the lowest point of her life. He thought about himself standing at a kitchen window 18 months ago, with cold coffee and a careful, quiet life, and the specific loneliness that wore the mask of peace. She helped me figure it out too, he said. Coming back to it, the full-size version. Victoria looked at him. She told me that you changed after the divorce, got quieter, more careful. She told you that last month. She was very matter-of-fact about it. Victoria's expression softened in the way it still did when she talked about Lily unselfconsciously completely. She said, Dad used to be bigger. He's getting bigger again. She paused. I thought that was the most precise thing anyone had said about you. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, Lily called them both to come inspect the latch, voice carrying through the glass non-negotiable. Coming? Daniel called. He looked at Victoria. Bigger, he said. Considerably, she said. They went outside. The latch was objectively excellent work. Daniel told Lily this and meant it. Lily accepted the assessment with appropriate dignity and then immediately asked if they could get pizza because fixing things was hungry work. And Victoria said yes before Daniel could calculate anything, and Lily pumped her fist and went inside to wash her hands. Standing at the newly repaired gate, Victoria ran her thumb over the clean latch. She fixed the thing we were both pretending wasn't broken, she said. She has a talent for that. Victoria smiled, the real one, the unhurried one. We should probably stop letting a 9-year-old manage our emotional infrastructure. Probably, Daniel agreed. But she's very good at it. She laughed. And he took her hand right there at the gate, between their yards, easy and certain, the way you hold the hand of someone you've stopped being careful around. The pizza came. The evening came. Lily fell asleep on Victoria's couch at 9:30, with Scout and Bo arranged around her like a small honor guard, and Daniel carried her across the street without waking her, while Victoria held the doors, and they moved through this small domestic choreography with the ease of people who had done it enough times that it no longer required coordination. It simply happened fluent and unspoken. He came back across after settling Lily. Victoria was on the porch step. He sat beside her. I have something to tell you, she said. He waited. The company. She turned her coffee mug in her hands. I've been restructuring since the legal settlement closed. Bringing in a COO, redistributing some of my load, building the team properly instead of running everything through myself. She paused. I've been doing it for the right reasons. Sustainability scale. All the things I know intellectually are correct. But also, she stopped. Also, he said. Also, because I want to be here more. She said it to the street, not to him, the way she said the harder things sideways, without making it a performance. I have spent 15 years building something that required everything I had, and I don't regret it. I would do it again. But I have been living in my company instead of my life, and I don't want to do that anymore. She finally looked at him. I want to be here. For the farmers' markets and the school projects and the fence latches and the... She stopped. For this. I want to be here for this. Daniel held her gaze. Victoria, I'm not saying I'm stepping back from work. That's not who I am, and I wouldn't pretend otherwise. I know that. I'm saying I'm making room. She held his eyes. For the first time in 15 years, I'm making room. He understood exactly what this cost her to say. Not the words, but the decision behind them, the rearranging of a self that had been built around self-sufficiency and forward motion, the choosing of something that required staying still long enough to be known. I'll be here, he said. Every morning you want coffee over the fence. Every school thing Lily needs you at. Every Sunday when it gets complicated and you need someone to just sit in the room. He paused. And every time you need to be completely left alone to work for 18 hours straight, I will bring food to the door and leave it there and not say a single word. She looked at him. Something moved through her face, amused and grateful and real. You know me very well, she said. I've been paying attention. Since the window, she said. Since the window, he agreed. She leaned into him shoulder to shoulder, then more her head, tilting toward his easy and deliberate. He put his arm around her. They sat like that on her porch step, while the street went quiet and the lights in the neighboring houses went off one by one. This was the thing nobody had written in the script of how love was supposed to look, that it could arrive this quietly. That it could feel less like falling and more like finally finding the right footing. That two people could come to each other already carrying everything they'd lived through and still find somewhere in the ordinary texture of dogs and coffee and broken latches and 9-year-old diplomats something worth building. The first test came in October. Not from Ryan. He had disappeared cleanly after the signatures, the way people disappeared when you stopped giving them a stage. Not from Claire, who had visited in September and been warm and genuine, and who had taken one look at the way Daniel moved through his own life and said quietly to him alone, "You look like yourself again." He'd held that for days. The test came from inside the way the real tests always did. It was a Tuesday evening, ordinary in every surface respect. Lily had a school project deadline. Victoria had a board presentation the following morning. Significant high stakes, the kind of meeting that preceded major strategic decisions. She'd been working since 6 a.m., tight and focused in that compressed professional mode that Daniel had learned to read from 30 yards. At 7:30, she sent him a text. Going to be late tonight. Don't wait up. He read it. He understood it. He put his phone down and made dinner for Lily, and helped with the project, and got her to bed, and did not go across the street, and did not text again. At 10:15, his phone lit up. Are you awake? He typed back. Yes. 3 minutes later, she knocked on his back door. Still in her work clothes, laptop bag, over one shoulder, the specific exhaustion of someone who had been performing competence for 16 hours and had run out of performance. I didn't eat dinner, she said. I know. He stepped back from the door. I saved you a plate. She came in. She sat at his kitchen table. He heated the plate pasta simple, the kind of thing that required nothing, and set it in front of her and sat across with his own cold coffee, and neither of them said anything for 2 minutes while she ate. Then she said, the board presentation is about a merger offer. He looked up. A significant one, she said. From a firm I respect. The terms are genuinely good. It would mean resources I don't currently have, distribution I've been trying to build for 3 years. She pushed her fork around. It would also mean ceding some control. Not majority, I negotiated hard on that. But some. What's the question? He said. Whether I can do it. She looked at him. Whether I can share something I built from nothing with people who didn't build it. Whether that's growth or whether it's loss. A pause. Whether I'm making this decision from strength or from... She stopped. From what? From wanting to make room, she said. And being afraid of what happens if my company needs less of me and I don't know who I am without it. The kitchen was quiet. Bo was at her feet. She hadn't noticed him put his head there, but her hand dropped automatically to his ears. Who were you? Daniel said carefully, before the company was the whole answer. She thought about it. Really thought about it, not performing consideration, but actually sitting in the question. Curious, she said slowly. I was very curious about everything systems people, why things worked the way they worked. I used to read things just because I wanted to know them, not because they were useful. She paused. I used to laugh more easily, before I understood how much everything cost. She looked at him. I'd like to be curious again. I think I've been starting to be. You already are, he said. You asked Lily 3 questions about her Ohio project that she's still processing. She smiled despite herself. State representation in popular culture is genuinely underexplored. You've been talking about it for 2 weeks. Because she made a compelling initial argument, and I want to see where it goes. She shook her head, and the smile stayed, and underneath the exhaustion, something lighter was visible. I do want to know things again, just because. That's who you are without the company as the whole answer, he said. You're still that person. The company came from her. It doesn't replace her. She looked at him across the table, pasta half-eaten, both dogs now arranged around her feet, the kitchen warm and ordinary and completely thoroughly real. Take the merger, he said. Not because it makes room, because it's strategically correct and you know it. The room you're making that's separate, that's already decided. She was quiet for a moment. You're certain, she said. I'm certain about you, he said. The merger is yours to decide. She looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up her fork and finished her dinner. The presentation went well. The merger moved forward on her terms. And life on Maple Creek Drive continued with the unhurried accumulation of ordinary, extraordinary moments that where Daniel had come to understand the actual substance of a full life. The proposal happened on a Saturday in November, which was not planned. He had been planning it carefully in the way he did things with attention to what she would and wouldn't want. No restaurant, no public setting, no performance. Something real, something theirs. But it happened on a Saturday because Lily asked a question at breakfast that he hadn't anticipated. The 3 of them were at Victoria's kitchen table. This had become the default on Saturday mornings, the gravity of the better French toast and the larger table, and the simple fact that this was where everyone wanted to be. Lily was reading. Victoria was on her laptop, one eye on the screen, and one ear on the room in the particular partial attention she'd developed that meant she was working and also completely present. Daniel was doing nothing productive and feeling fine about it. Lily looked up from her book and said without preamble, "Are you guys going to get married?" Victoria's typing stopped. Daniel set down his coffee. "Lily," he said. "I'm just asking," Lily said, "because I think you should, and I want to know if I need to prepare something or if you're going to be weird about it for another year." The kitchen held a very specific silence. Daniel looked at Victoria. Victoria was looking at Lily with an expression that was trying very hard to be composed, and was instead the most open he had ever seen her face, unguarded and moved, and trying not to show how moved she was, and failing beautifully, completely failing. "We haven't discussed it," Daniel said. "You discuss everything else," Lily said. "You discuss Scout's dietary habits for 20 minutes sometimes." "That's a valid ongoing concern." "Dad?" Lily closed her book. She looked at him with the steady directness that was entirely her own. "She fixed you. You fixed her. I watched it happen from like 2 feet away for a year and a half. What are you waiting for?" Daniel looked at his daughter. He looked at Victoria. Victoria was looking at him now, not at Lily. Her expression was quiet and certain, and entirely without performance, just her fully present waiting for nothing because she already knew. He reached into his jacket pocket. He had been carrying the ring for 3 weeks. Small, clean, a single stone, nothing ostentatious. He had chosen it with the specific knowledge of exactly who she was and what she would and wouldn't want. He set it on the table in front of her. No speech, no kneeling, just the ring on the table and his eyes on her face. "Victoria," he said, "I was standing at a window with cold coffee, You told me if I wanted to look, I should just ask. He paused. I'm asking. She looked at the ring. She looked at him. Her eyes were bright, and her jaw was set in the way it's set when she was feeling something large and had decided to feel it anyway. Scout put his head on the table, which broke the solemnity completely. Victoria laughed. The real laugh, the surprised one, and reached out and took the ring with one hand and pushed Scout's head off the table with the other, and Lily made a sound of pure triumph that she had clearly been saving for exactly this moment. Yes, Victoria said, still laughing, looking at him through it. Obviously, yes. He put the ring on her finger. She looked at it small and clean and exactly right, and then she looked at him with the expression he had first seen in an unguarded flash at the farmer's market, the one that was open and real and not managed at all. You've been carrying that for 3 weeks, she said. I was waiting for the right moment. And a 9-year-old calling you out at breakfast was the right moment. Apparently, he said, she had a timeline. Lily from across the table with great serenity. I gave you until Thanksgiving. I was running out of patience. Victoria reached across the table and took Lily's hand. She held it for a moment, this small, serious person who had engineered so much of what was now their life, and she said quietly and directly, the way she said the things that mattered, I want you to know that I'm not just saying yes to your dad. I'm saying yes to you, to this, to all of it. Lily looked at her. Her chin lifted slightly in the way it did when she was holding something very full. I know, she said. That's why I asked. The November morning continued around them. Bo and Scout resumed their habitual arrangement on the kitchen floor. The coffee went warm and then cold. Lily went back to her book with the satisfied composure of a person whose project had concluded successfully. Victoria kept looking at the ring with the particular expression of someone encountering evidence that something real had happened and choosing fully to believe it. And Daniel Mercer, the man who had spent 3 years making loneliness look like peace, who had stood at a kitchen window with cold coffee and a careful small life, who had been seen through glass by a woman who did not look away, sat at a table that had become the center of something he hadn't known he was still allowed to want. He was not watching from a window anymore. He was here, fully here, present in his own life in the way that only becomes possible when you stop mistaking caution for wisdom, and finally, at considerable cost and with tremendous grace, let someone all the way in. Outside the fence gate between their yards stood open, fixed, functional, permanently unlatched, and on Maple Creek Drive on an ordinary Saturday in November. An ordinary, extraordinary life continued exactly as it was meant to. Not perfect, not quiet in the old hollow way, but full, completely, irreversibly, beautifully full,